What would you do when a wild, powerful animal overcomes all barriers of fear to bring a package and place it right on your doorstep? This was not a confrontation. It was an act of entrustment. If you believe in the power of stories that can change the world, press the subscribe button now and join us in uncovering the mystery behind the evidence on the doorstep. The morning in Virunga National Park began with a familiar stillness, broken only by the sounds of insects and the gentle wind passing through the bamboo groves. Ranger Sarah sat in her simple wooden cabin, the morning light highlighting the pages where she logged data on the wildlife activity. Sarah is a devoted expert who has spent over a decade protecting the fragile balance of the ecosystem here. She knew this forest like the back of her hand, and because of that, she knew that what was about to happen was completely extraordinary. Around 7 a.m., as Sarah was checking her binoculars, a heavy, deliberate sound echoed just outside. It was not the chaotic noise of nature. It was slow, decisive footsteps stopping right on the wet grass outside the door. Sarah slowly looked up. Standing just a few meters from her was Kingo, the colossal silverback gorilla, the authoritative leader of the local troop. Kingo was immense, his dark eyes filled with power. But what caught Sarah's attention was not his size or strength. It was the absolute silence and the intensely watchful gaze, mixed with a strange urgency. Kingo did not growl or threaten. It quietly bent down, using one hand to carefully place a black nylon bag onto the grass, right in Sarah's line of sight. Then, it stood tall and stared intently at her through the window pane. Sarah remained completely still. She knew that wild gorillas viewed humans as the ultimate threat and always kept their distance. This direct approach, especially with a strange object, was unprecedented. This was not trespassing. It was a deliberate action, an assignment. In Kingo's eyes, Sarah saw neither anger nor fear, but only a silent plea. What was in that black bag, and why had this wild creature placed it in a human's hands? Sarah put her hand on the doorknob. Her heart pounded, but her mind was completely focused and calm. She knew that any sudden movement could break this fragile moment of trust. Kingo remained there, its eyes never leaving her. Sarah slowly opened the door, each step calculated to avoid making too much noise. The relationship between humans and gorillas is an extremely thin line. One wrong move could lead to extreme fear, or worse, aggression. As Sarah stepped out, Kingo let out a soft, deep grunt. The sound was more like a heavy sigh than a threat. That was the call Sarah had learned over the years, an acknowledgement of suffering. She approached the black nylon bag. It was heavier than she thought. In that moment, Sarah felt she was more than just a ranger. She was the recipient of an urgent request. With the utmost care, Sarah slowly opened the bag. Her eyes were immediately drawn to the soft, warm object inside. A baby gorilla, soaked and huddled, seemingly barely clinging to life. The little creature was badly injured, a deep laceration on its leg, and its fur was matted with dried blood that had turned dark brown. Despite the shock, Sarah's professional instincts immediately took precedence. "It's okay, little
It's
one,"
all right,
she
Kingo.
whispered,
Everything
her
is
voice
going to be
reassuring
just fine.
even to Kingo standing a few meters away. She carefully lifted the infant, feeling its light weight and shallow breathing. As she lifted the animal, Sarah's eyes rested on a second strange object clinging to its fur. A torn scrap of khaki fabric, stiff and coarse, not the type of clothing worn by rangers or scientists. And then she noticed the dried, dark red blood streaks that were not on the baby gorilla, but on the fabric entangled in the nearby strands of fur. At this point, Kingo let out a louder moan. It lowered its head to look at the baby, then turned toward the jungle, its eyes filled with pain and intense vigilance. That gesture was a silent goodbye, an act of entrustment. Kingo had done what needed to be done and now needed to return to its troop, or at least what remained of it. Immediately after, the colossal silverback turned and quickly vanished into the thicket. Sarah rushed the baby gorilla into her small rescue station. While cleaning the wounds and administering painkillers, she took blood samples from the infant to check for pathogens. But as she worked, her mind couldn't forget the khaki fabric and those strange bloodstains. They were too distinct, too dark to be just gorilla blood. A cold feeling ran down her spine. With extra caution, Sarah took a sample of the blood stuck to the torn fabric and another blood-stained strand of hair. She told herself it could be the blood of another predator or even a wounded great ape. But the intuition of a seasoned ranger whispered something entirely different. As she placed the samples into a small test tube, the suspicion turned into a question that resonated almost certainly in her head. Human blood. Where did it come from? And why would Kingo bring it to me? Submitting blood samples for analysis at a specialized laboratory was a rare procedure in Sarah's work, but the urgency in Kingo's eyes forced her hand. 2 days later, as the infant gorilla had stabilized but was still weak, the DNA results arrived via satellite. Sarah opened the document file with a feeling of breathtaking tension. The data displayed clearly and coldly. The blood on the khaki fabric and the baby gorilla's fur belonged to a human. The shock did not stop there. Based on the poacher crime database collected by conservation organizations and governments, the DNA sample matched the profile of a notorious poacher named Duma, who had mysteriously gone missing weeks ago and was suspected of perpetrating several illegal wildlife trafficking cases. Kingo's gift suddenly took on a new and terrifying significance. It was no accident. It was evidence. Sarah immediately convened a small team of her most trusted rangers. She didn't just need to save a gorilla. She needed to investigate a crime and understand what truly happened deep in the forest. Based on the direction Kingo took upon leaving, Sarah and her team began tracking clues in the jungle area. They moved slowly, searching for any sign of a violent confrontation. The forest, which was a sanctuary of life, now felt like a vast crime scene. After many hours of searching, they found the first sign, a large unnatural tear on a tree trunk, possibly caused by a heavy, sharp object hitting it. Going a little deeper, they discovered a series of subtly camouflaged steel traps, the deadly kind used to catch large animals, including gorillas. The injured infant gorilla had most likely been wounded by one of these traps before Kingo intervened. And then they found it, a small, devastated area. Leaves and branches were trampled, with traces of mud and old blood. They discovered empty bullet casings scattered on the ground, along with a ripped hiking bag and an abandoned machete. Clearly, Duma and his accomplices had set traps and intended to fight back. Analyzing the scene, Sarah realized the horrifying truth. There were no signs that the fight was between humans. The bullets were fired erratically, inaccurately. The large, powerful footprints of a colossal gorilla covered all other traces. Clearly, Duma had been bravely attacked by Kingo, the silverback leader, as it tried to protect its family. Kingo may have been injured, but it won, protecting at least a portion of the troop. Sarah picked up another piece of torn khaki fabric clinging to a branch. Her eyes settled with deep reverence and understanding. Kingo had not just killed the poacher out of instinct. It had done something unprecedented. It had taken the evidence, the attacker's blood, the khaki fabric, and brought it to the human it trusted most. That action transcended mere survival. Kingo was telling her, "They did this. Help us." The search was no longer about finding the poacher. It was about confirming a dark truth. The gorillas had become the victims of a crime, and their leader had sought justice from humankind itself. After determining the location of the confrontation between Kingo and Duma, Sarah understood that she needed to find the place the silverback troop called home to grasp the full extent of the tragedy. Kingo's act of bringing the wounded infant and the blood-stained evidence to her cabin door was not the end, but the beginning of a much more heartbreaking story. Following the tracks of skillful yet hurried movement, Sarah and her colleagues found the area where the gorilla troop had taken shelter. Unlike the chaos of a battle scene, this area held a deadly silence. The foliage was broken, the ground had long slide marks, but there were no whimpers, none of the usual calls of the family group. A feeling of emptiness permeated the place that should have been full of family life. Upon closer inspection, Sarah discovered chilling signs. a quickly extinguished pile of ashes where the poachers might have attempted to destroy evidence. And most horribly, she found old, scattered bloodstains around the areas where the gorillas usually slept. The traces were too numerous, too dark to be just ordinary injuries from a chase. With her experience, Sarah painfully determined the former resting place of another infant gorilla, and perhaps an adult female, a monumental loss for a species facing extinction. The signs indicated that at least 2 individuals in the troop had been killed, very likely for body parts for the black market, or to capture a young one, as in the case of the infant Sarah was treating. Sarah knelt by a patch of dry mud, where she recognized Kingo's large handprint. She felt the pain, the anger, and the despair of the troop leader as it witnessed its family torn apart by the poachers. Kingo had tried to protect, had fought, and had killed an attacker, but couldn't save them all. That was when Sarah grasped the entire truth. Kingo bringing the injured baby gorilla to her was the most urgent act of rescue, entrusting a fragile hope to a human. But more importantly, carrying the blood-stained human fabric, the proof of the slaughter, was a silent plea for justice. Kingo didn't want revenge. It wanted the poachers' actions to be punished, wanted them stopped to protect the remaining members. In that moment, the walls separating the human world and the wild world seemed to collapse. Kingo, the animal with the highest survival instinct, had overcome all fear and hostility to seek help from the very species that, by all rights, should have been its enemy. The gift was not just the life of an infant, but belief. Protect us from the danger we cannot stop on our own. This truth was heartbreaking, but it also brought a fragile hope for a new connection forged in blood and trust. The sun began to set behind the volcanic peaks, painting the reserve in red-orange hues. Sarah sat on the wooden steps of her cabin, the very spot where Kingo had placed the trust of its entire troop just days before. The baby gorilla was recovering well in the rescue station, a fragile life pulled back from the jaws of death. She looked towards the forest, where Kingo had vanished, and in her hand was the clean, folded khaki fabric, now a symbol, a piece of evidence, and a vow. With the evidence from the blood and the fabric, along with the detailed report of the guerrilla troop massacre scene, Sarah and her team quickly coordinated with local authorities and international organizations. Duma's DNA match created an undeniable case, leading to the arrest and prosecution of his accomplices. This story was not just a small victory for one troop of guerrillas. It was a clear confirmation that justice can and must be served, even when the cry for help comes from a non-speaking species. Sarah understood that the relationship between humans and nature had crossed a new threshold. It was no longer simply a relationship between the protector and the protected. Kingo had taught her a lesson that decades of research could not provide. Gorillas are not just intelligent creatures. They're capable of deep trust and entrustment at a profound level, recognizing the human system of justice and willing to take risks to utilize it. Sarah sent a powerful message to the world through conservation organizations. Kingo didn't bring a trophy skull or a horn as a prize. It brought the evidence of a crime. When an animal brings evidence to your door, it means it believes you will do the right thing. That trust is the most sacred and profound gift nature gives us. The story of the evidence on the doorstep quickly spread globally. It was not a sensational story of revenge, but an emotional narrative about belief. It became a symbol for the necessity of deep connection, urging people to view conservation not as a top-down obligation, but as a reciprocal, two-way partnership. The infant gorilla was named Hope. As she watched Hope grow, Sarah knew she wasn't just caring for an individual. She was keeping a promise. She looked toward the jungle one last time, where Kingo's males continued to patrol, silently guarding their legacy. Sometimes, to truly protect the wild world, we must admit that we are not the saviors. We are the allies. The question is not whether we could save Kingo, but whether we are worthy of the trust he placed in us. Share this story. Let it remind us that protection only holds meaning when it is built upon absolute, unconditional trust. Let us honor Kingo's belief.